Donald Mark stood on stage at a Millionaire event, addressing a crowd of engineers, investors, and fans. He was excitedly sharing the company's latest innovations, particularly how their new AI technology could revolutionize the automobile industry. The room was filled with energy, with applause and cheers after every announcement. When his presentation ended, Donald stepped back and, smiling at the audience, invited questions. The room went silent as hands went up, eager to ask. Donald pointed to the back, where a young girl stood and spoke. She was different from the others. Instead of a suit or a tech-branded t-shirt, she wore simple clothes and carried a notebook. Her voice was calm but full of conviction as she asked, "Mr. Mark, my name is Victoria. I'm 19 from a small town, and I've built a robot in my garage with scrap materials. I don't have a college degree or professional training, but I want to work at Millionaire. Will you hire me?" The room was stunned. No one expected such a direct, bold question. Whispers spread, some people even chuckled. A teenager, with no formal qualifications, asking for a job from Donald Mark? It seemed impossible. Donald raised his eyebrows, intrigued, and asked, "A robot, huh? What can it do?" Victoria, a bit nervous, replied, "Right now it can pick up objects and do simple tasks. But I know I can make it better if I have the right resources." The crowd waited, anticipating Donald's response. Some thought he'd dismiss her immediately, while others expected a polite but quick rejection. But Donald Mark wasn't like most people. He leaned forward, his tone calm yet challenging. "You built this in your garage?" "Yes," Victoria answered. After a brief pause, Donald said, "Okay, here's the deal. If you can improve your robot to solve a real-world problem and show me something impressive, I'll consider giving you a job." The room gasped. Was he serious? The CEO of Millionaire and Spacey had just challenged a teenager. Victoria's face lit up with determination. "Challenge accepted, Mr. Mark," she said confidently. As she sat down, murmurs filled the room. Some were inspired by her courage, while others doubted she could succeed. But one thing was certain: everyone was eager to see what would happen next. Unbeknownst to them, this moment was just the start of an incredible journey that would leave the world in awe. After the event, Victoria returned to her small town, still filled with excitement. The challenge Donald Mark had given her replayed in her mind constantly. This was her chance to change her life. Victoria lived in a modest neighborhood where everyone knew each other. Her house was small but cozy, and behind it was her secret workshop, a simple garage. Inside, an old wooden table was cluttered with tools, wires, and parts from broken gadgets she had collected over the years. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrap metal, motors, and batteries salvaged from junkyards. This was where her dream began. The robot she had showcased at the event sat in the corner. It was far from perfect. It could pick up small objects and follow simple commands, but it wasn't nearly impressive enough to catch the eye of someone like Donald Mark. She knew she had to improve it drastically, but the challenge seemed daunting, and she wasn't sure where to begin. Sitting at her desk, she stared at the robot, feeling overwhelmed. "How do I make this something Donald will notice?" she whispered to herself. Victoria came from a family struggling to make ends meet. Her mother was a nurse, and her father drove a taxi. They supported her as best they could, but money was always tight. Despite their financial struggles, Victoria's passion for technology had never wavered. She had no access to expensive tools or formal education, so she taught herself everything by watching YouTube videos and reading free online tutorials. Growing up, Victoria faced mockery from her neighbors, who criticized her for spending so much time on junk. They'd tell her, "You're wasting your time. Get a real job." But Victoria ignored them. She had big dreams, and Donald Mark's challenge was her chance to prove everyone wrong. Donald had given her 30 days to upgrade her robot and make it impressive. Victoria knew it wouldn't be easy. The robot had to solve a real-world problem. But with limited resources, how could she tackle a real challenge? After days of thinking, Victoria decided her mission. She would build a robot that could sort and recycle trash in her community. Waste management was a major issue. Trash often piled up in the streets because people didn't separate recyclables from non-recyclables. If her robot could solve this problem, it would not only impress Donald, but also benefit her community. Victoria worked tirelessly in her garage, day and night. Her first challenge was sourcing the materials. Without money to buy expensive parts, she scavenged junkyards for old electronics. Sometimes she found useful motors or sensors, other times she came back empty-handed. Her second challenge was learning advanced coding to make her robot smarter. She spent countless hours watching tutorials and reading forums. There were times when the code wouldn't work, and she wanted to give up. But each time frustration set in, she remembered Donald's words, "Show me something impressive." As the days went by, Victoria's increased time in the garage didn't go unnoticed by her neighbors. Some mocked her, saying, "Do you really think Donald Mark cares about a kid from this town? You're aiming too high." Even some of her friends expressed doubts, telling her, "Why not focus on getting a job at a local store? This robot stuff won't pay off." But Victoria wasn't deterred. She had something they didn't, a vision and the drive to prove them all wrong. One day, while struggling to fix a broken part of her robot, an elderly man from the neighborhood knocked on her garage door. He introduced himself as Mr. Harris, a retired engineer. "I've been hearing about your project," he said. "Do you need help?" Victoria hesitated, but then explained her challenge. To her surprise, Mr. Harris not only understood her goal, but also offered invaluable advice. He helped her optimize the robot's motors and guided her through complex coding issues. With his help, Victoria's robot began to take shape. It wasn't perfect, but it was showing real promise. As the deadline approached, Victoria worked harder than ever. There were nights when she barely slept, fixing errors and testing her robot. Her garage became her entire world, and time seemed to fly by. With just 3 days left, Victoria's robot successfully sorted trash into recyclables and non-recyclables during a test run. It wasn't just functional, it was efficient. Victoria smiled to herself, whispering, "Donald Mark, you're going to see this." But she knew her journey wasn't over. The big question remained, would the robot work perfectly in front of Donald and the Millionaire team? The day of the presentation was fast approaching. Victoria stood in her garage, looking at her robot. It appeared ready, but she understood that performance was what mattered, not appearance. After weeks of struggle, her robot could now sort trash into 3 categories: recyclables, non-recyclables, and organic waste. It wasn't flawless, but it showed real potential to make a difference. Victoria smiled at her creation. "You're going to prove everyone wrong," she whispered. Even with the robot working, Victoria couldn't shake her nerves. What if it breaks down in front of Donald, she thought, fear of failure creeping in. But she pushed those thoughts aside. The final 2 days were spent rehearsing her presentation. Victoria practiced explaining the robot's purpose confidently, with her family helping by pretending to be the audience. Her mother, her biggest supporter, reassured her, saying, "You've worked so hard, Victoria. No matter what happens, we're proud of you." On the morning of the event, Victoria carefully packed her robot into a box, double-checking every detail. She chose a simple white shirt and black pants for her outfit, tying her hair neatly. It wasn't about looking perfect, but she wanted to present herself professionally. As she left her house, neighbors gathered outside, watching her departure. Some appeared impressed, while others remained skeptical. One woman remarked, "Let's see if Donald Mark even remembers her." Victoria didn't respond. She had learned to block out the negativity. When Victoria arrived at the Millionaire campus, the atmosphere was electric. Engineers, executives, and media representatives filled the room. She felt out of place among all the polished professionals, but held her head high. Finally, it was her turn. She walked onto the stage with her robot in tow, aware that Donald Mark, the man who had given her the challenge, was sitting in the front row, watching her closely. "Good afternoon," Victoria began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "3 weeks ago, I stood here and told Mr. Mark that I'd built a robot in my garage. He challenged me to solve a real-world problem. Today, I'm here to show you what I've created." She placed her robot on the demonstration table and powered it on. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see what would happen. Victoria set up a pile of trash, plastic bottles, paper, and food waste. The robot whirred to life, its mechanical arms scanning the items using the basic AI she had programmed. Slowly, it began sorting the trash into separate bins. The audience watched in silence. It wasn't fast or flashy, but it worked. When the robot placed the final item in the correct bin, the room erupted in applause. Victoria felt a rush of relief and glanced at Donald, who was nodding with a slight smile. But just as everything seemed perfect, the robot made a loud clicking noise and froze. The applause stopped, and the room fell silent. Victoria's heart sank. Rushing over to the robot, she tried to diagnose the problem, her forehead sweating as she realized that one of the motors had overheated. The murmurs from the audience grew louder. Some seemed disappointed, while others shook their heads. Victoria heard whispers. "She tried, but she's not ready for this level." Donald stood up and walked toward the stage. Victoria's panic intensified. Was he going to end it here? Instead, he asked, "Do you know what caused the problem?" Victoria nodded, swallowing her fear. "It's the motor. It's overheating because the load is too heavy." Donald handed her a tool from the nearby table. "Fix it," he said simply. Victoria's hands shook as she opened the robot's casing. She had fixed similar issues countless times in her garage, but this moment felt different. Now the whole world was watching. She replaced the overheated motor with a spare she had brought and recalibrated the robot. The process took 10 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. Finally, she stepped back and restarted the robot. This time it worked flawlessly. The robot completed the sorting task faster than before, and the audience erupted into cheers. Victoria exhaled deeply, a smile spreading across her face. Donald clapped and said, "That's what I like to see. Someone who doesn't give up when things go wrong." Walking up to Victoria, Donald stood beside her and addressed the crowd. "You've done something incredible," he said. "You've shown that innovation doesn't need fancy labs or degrees. What it needs is passion and determination." Turning to Victoria, he added, "You've earned your place at Millionaire. But more than that, I want to help you develop this robot into something that can change the world." The crowd exploded into applause, and Victoria felt tears welling in her eyes. She had done it. Victoria's journey, from a small-town dreamer to a Millionaire innovator, became a powerful symbol of resilience and determination. With Donald Mark's guidance, her trash-sorting robot transformed into a revolutionary waste management tool, making a lasting impact in communities worldwide. Her story inspired countless others to chase their dreams, proving that with passion and perseverance, even the impossible is achievable. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring stories.